Hello and welcome to a new episode of the Cradle News Roundup. I am Karim, and today I'm joined with the investigative writer and our colleague here at the Cradle, William Van Wagenen. William Van Wagenen. Hello, William. How are you? Fine.
Hey, good. Kareem, how are you doing?
I am good. So today we will talk about Gaza, we'll talk about Syria, and we will talk about also Lebanon. We can start with Gaza, with the ceasefire, and we all know that the agreement is somehow not is vague. There's no actual points clear about the deal, and every country is talking as if. They saw another deal, and we saw that Hamas also. So for instance, the Americans said that Hamas would disarm, but we saw officials from Hamas saying no, we didn't agree about that. And just today there was a news in Hebrew media saying that, for instance, Israel didn't allow Turkish personnel to enter the strip because they said that they will send like an Arab force and Turkish force, and then the Turkish said, no, we will not send the army, we'll send civil defense people to search for bodies. And of course, the main topic is disarming Hamas. And just today, Witkoff, who's the American envoy to the Middle East, he said that the Americans and the West will not put boots on the ground. And we all know that Israel withdrew to a certain line, and they said they will withdraw more by time. My first question is, do you think Hamas will hand over its weapon if there is no Israeli army or American army to disarm it?
Well, yeah, that's a good question. I mean, again, Hamas has said several times that they don't plan to disarm, and then Netanyahu is insisting that they must. So this is a strange point of disagreement. You know, if there was a ceasefire agreement, how did they really agree on something if that crucial point you're getting different things from different people? Trump said in a video that Hamas would be disarmed and that the U.S. would disarm them, but I guess that was contradicted by what Witkoff said. So that's a problem. And, a lot of people, I think, when the ceasefire was, when it or became implemented a week ago, they were pretty optimistic, saying this is the end of the genocide and things like that. But I'm not so sure, because of how vague it is, and because of the fact that there's this disagreement on Hamas disarming, and because Israel, Netanyahu in particular, has been insisting, for the basically to keep the war going, not just him, but Bezalel Smotrich and Itamar Ben-Gvir, the ministers in his cabinet, they've shown like over and over the past 2 years that when Hamas was willing to do a deal, they've shown that they just have tried to sabotage it. They just want the war to keep going because, in my opinion, they're not really trying to defeat Hamas. They're just trying to destroy Gaza and make it unlivable and make it hell for the 2 million people living there, so that eventually they'll be forced to leave, whether to Egypt or Libya or Somalia or Indonesia or wherever the Israelis can kick them out to. So I just worry that, maybe this issue of Hamas not disarming will continue to be used by the Israelis just as a pretext to, essentially keep the war going or to restart it. I mean, obviously there was the ceasefire in January that, lasted for about a month, if I remember. And then Netanyahu just unilaterally ended it and then, reinstated the siege to starve people and started the bombing again. So I don't know. I'm a bit negative or pessimistic on what's going to happen from here on out. But I don't know. What's your feeling about it?
Yeah, me too. And I'm somehow negative because first I think Hamas they had the leverage in some places because they had the bodies of the captives and living captives, but now they don't have like a strong card to negotiate with or to force Israelis to stop anything. Although, of course, Netanyahu didn't stop. But I think it's somehow difficult because I really believe that Trump wants to be the hero of this war and he wants this war to end. And I feel it's very difficult to Israel to يعني to start bombing Gaza as they were to, as they were, yeah. But also we have the Lebanese scenario, which tell us they can do it because here in Lebanon, Hezbollah never fire. يعني they stopped firing even a bullet now since like 13 months. Until now, every day Israel is bombing and killing Lebanese. Yeah, especially yesterday. Now I will put some footage. Yeah, and yesterday's bombings in South Lebanon was very huge, and in Bekaa also. I will share some footage now. So maybe the ground operation will end eventually, but I think they will also keep firing missiles from the air or from drones or assassinating people from Hamas, because as you said, their ultimate goal is to occupy Gaza and to make all the Palestinians in Gaza refugees to other countries. And if this is their ultimate goal, they will continue. I don't think Trump will prevent them of doing this, but I think Trump will prevent them of occupying Gaza or putting boots on the ground. That's my vision of what's happening in Gaza. And as I said at the beginning of this episode, everything is vague. Yani we don't have actual points uh, from what is the agreement. And we saw the agreement, which is 20-point agreements. First they said it's 21, now it's 20, and there's many things in the agreement that are not clear, and they don't have a timeline, a strict timeline of things. Until now, Trump is talking about Tony Blair, for instance. We don't know the role of Tony Blair. Will he be the ruler of Gaza? Yani if for instance an Egyptian force is agreed to go to Gaza, they have to take the okay from Tony Blair first. You know what I mean? He
Yeah.
will be like the mediator between Israel and these
Yeah.
people. I don't know. And even the reconstruction, because Trump said day one we will start reconstruction, but nobody is talking about that. And who will come and remove the rubble, where the rubble will be put, because it's huge. We all know, and they destroyed like 85% of Gaza. So there's many points that are still, يعني, I don't know if they agreed on everything. I think everything was very fast. And I said in the last podcast, I think Trump read that we agree, you see, because Hamas started their statement like this, and he was okay, they agreed. And he put himself in a situation that he wants to end the war fast because Hamas agreed. And now the real points are really hanging. And one of them, of course, disarming Hamas, rebuilding. Uh, and they said that anybody can go outside from Gaza and they will not force them to go outside. But if you want to return, you can return. Still, we don't know did how many people left Gaza. Did anybody left Gaza to Egypt, for instance, to get like medicine, and did he come back? And because last time we saw the borders uh, between Gaza and Egypt, it's like World War II. You know, you see the trenches, you see big walls. So I think we have to wait and see. But of course, these are very important topics that we should tackle also.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
again, another thing that I worry about is that, again, from the perspective of Netanyahu and for sure Smotrich and Ben-Gvir, I was just reading earlier this week about the Israeli rabbi that Smotrich and Ben-Gvir follow. His name is Dov Lior. And he made comments all the way back in 2014 saying that the Israeli army should destroy Gaza like completely and then incorporate it into the land of Israel to keep Israelis safe. And he's made many comments like that since the genocide started. So I think that, again, indicates to me at least what the Israeli war strategy has always been, despite these different things that Netanyahu says about the captives or the hostages, obviously, or about defeating Hamas or this or that. They always say different reasons, but in my view, that's really the aim of the war, was just to destroy Gaza. And recently it was making Trump look bad. I guess that the war was continuing to happen. It was making the Israelis look bad. They were under the pressure from the Europeans. More and more European countries were saying they're going to recognize a Palestinian state. And a lot of European countries were like canceling orders to purchase weapons from Israel. So the Israeli weapons industry was hurting, which seems weird that they export a lot of weapons when they themselves are fighting. Like they import so many weapons, or they get for free so many weapons from the US, but their own industries, they sell a ton of weapons to the Europeans. And the Europeans are on this buying spree because of the Ukraine war. And so there's a lot of money to be made for the Israelis if they can keep exporting weapons to the Europeans. But because of the genocide, the Europeans are saying they don't want the Israelis to come to the arms shows, and they're canceling contracts and things like this. So it just seemed like the Israelis felt like, hey, if we can, end the fighting for now, or the major bombing, say we have a peace deal, Trump gets credit, makes him look good, they can improve their relationships with the Europeans again. But then again, if they just simply prevent reconstruction, which is really easy for them, and then again move to the model like in Lebanon, where they can pretty much just still keep bombing, but like on a smaller scale, instead of killing like 50 Palestinians a day. Like it almost seemed like they had a quota to kill a certain number of Palestinians today. Maybe they lower their quota from killing 50 a day down to like 5.
Yeah, 100%.
Then they can just keep this going and keep Palestinians in a place where they're still living in tents, and the long-term, future for Palestinians to remain in Gaza is still, very, very dark. There's also this interview that went around Twitter the other day about a former Israeli from a former Israeli intelligence officer who said that there is no future in Gaza. And he said, all we need to do, if we want to just start the war again, have some of our people, some like undercover Israeli people, like the Musta'arabin or the Israelis that speak Arabic or whatever agents they have in Gaza, we just have them shoot a few rockets from Gaza into Israel, like a small scale false flag attack, and we can just start the war again. So, like as you said, with the captives being returned, all the live captives being returned, it didn't seem like it gave Hamas that much leverage to begin with. Because again, Netanyahu's goal was always just to destroy Gaza, but still that gave them some leverage, Hamas, and now that's all gone. So I don't know. It just seems like, the Israelis, there's no guarantee that they're going to fully withdraw from Gaza. They're just behind that yellow line, and they could just reinvade, any time. They can keep bombing really at any time. And it's hard to be so negative, but I just,
I think the Ministry of Health in Gaza, I think today they announced that since the ceasefire, Israel killed 84 Palestinians inside Gaza. And I was just before we began, I came across a video. I will put it now. It's not only the army or Netanyahu. You even see like organizations inside Israel. They are described as non-political. Until now, they are preventing aid to enter Gaza. They have groups, and they know where the buses or where the trucks of aid are coming, and they just try to stop them. And it's not also about the government. And of course, this will be a very important card for politicians inside. And you can send a group of 10 people, as we're seeing now on the video. And look, for instance, and she put us, you can see it, William. She put her child in front of the aid truck to prevent the aid truck coming. On the other side, you'll see people holding Israeli flags. And you'll see only 3 people preventing 8 trucks. You can see like 5 trucks behind this one. Yani 8 for like thousands of people in Gaza. They are just stopped because of 3 Israelis.
Because of one guy in a stroller.
Yes,
and they can't just move.
Yeah, 100%. And this is from the Israeli media. Yani. It's not. So it's terrible there, to be honest.
Well, and today there was a story in Israeli media where they indicated that even like the humanitarian aid from over 1,000 trucks that did actually get inside Gaza through the Kerem Shalom crossing, it just still sat there inside of Gaza, and the Israeli army dug pits and burned and destroyed it all.
They do this.
So even if it gets into Gaza, there's really like not a very small chance it's actually going to get to people that are trying, all the way up in the north or in other places. So, I mean, again, we know too that that's been the policy to basically try to starve Palestinians since the beginning of the genocide, and that's what the ICC issued the arrest warrants for Netanyahu and Yoav Gallant about. So to think that because of this ceasefire, suddenly this impulse or desire by the Israelis to just like not starve Palestinians and force them, out of Gaza, it just seems very unlikely. And the other thing too is that, over the last couple of years that I've been living here in the Middle East, I've been to Iraq, I've been to Syria, I've been to and then here in Lebanon, and you see places that have been destroyed in wars over the past years, even going back to like 2014 in Iraq, for example. Like Mosul, the right bank of Mosul is still largely destroyed. It hasn't been rebuilt. There's huge parts of Syria and Damascus and Homs and Aleppo that have not been rebuilt. Even here in southern Lebanon, it's going to be extremely hard to rebuild. The Iranians in 2006, they sent lots of money to help people rebuild their homes and everything. But because the Americans now control Lebanon so tightly, Iran can't even get money in here to help people rebuild their homes that were
Yeah,
destroyed. So how is there going to be, if there's 10 years later, places in Iraq, Sinjar City, for example, where Yazidis were, they're still living in tents. Sinjar City has not been rebuilt. So how is Gaza gonna be rebuilt? Sometimes we think because of like Trump
yeah,
saying
yeah.
it's going to become the Riviera of the Middle East that somehow reconstruction is going to happen. But unless all the Palestinians are gone, that rebuilding is just not going to be allowed
Yeah,
by
it's,
the
it's very
Israelis.
difficult. Yeah, here, especially here in Lebanon, يعني, they bombed the biggest retailer of bulldozers in the south, and they are targeting everyday bulldozers right and left in the south. Anyone who's like trying to remove the rubble, not even like dig infrastructure to build a new building. Even the bulldozers are just removing the rubble from the streets. They are bombing it, and and of course our beloved country and government, they are not doing anything. And just yesterday, also now I will put some videos of yesterday bombings in South Lebanon. They were huge. They were very big. Uh, Reports from Lebanese media said that they targeted 22 locations in South Lebanon and in Bekaa. And here, if you can see the videos, they are really huge. And look at this explosion yesterday. And of course, they are saying they targeted weapons of Hezbollah or Hezbollah tunnel that's being built and blah blah. But currently, I don't think anybody now believes the Israelis. Uh, of course, but unfortunately, there's Lebanese that believe it's the Israelis because all of this, yani, is, I think it's political, and they are saying, yani, we are still here. Maybe Gaza war is over, but we are not over with Lebanon. And now also many politicians in Lebanon, they are talking about normalization or peace talks. Of course, they use peace talks, but of course, eventually they want normalization. And many people in Lebanon, even people that were not in good terms with Hezbollah, they are against this. But in the media, they are really pushing for peace with the Israelis in Lebanon. Although Lebanon, there's many issues that are current and previous with the Israelis. We have occupied land, we have the daily bombings, we have many things. We have also prisoners in Israel, and nobody's talking about them. And just today, the prime minister was asked about the prisoners. He got angry, you know. Yeah. So our prime minister is, yeah, I think he came just to like fulfill the orders from the West and from the Israelis, and everybody feels that. Even the Sunnis in Lebanon feels that. Although he's a Sunni, he's like, it's very complicated in Lebanon. The prime minister should be a Sunni, and the president should be Christian, and the head of the parliament should be Shia. So usually this position is for the Sunnis, and the majority of Sunnis are against what he's doing, and he's ignoring Israelis like on purpose. And he made. You were not here, William, but I think you knew about the Raushi Rock story.
Yeah,
He made a big deal out of it, and he barely mentions what's happening in the south.
because they put Hassan Nasrallah's
Yeah,
face on the
yeah,
Raush Rock in the Beirut Bay, and that
Yeah,
And the prime
this
minister
became
was
that.
more angry about that than the Israelis bombing in the
Yeah,
south.
which is insane, which is insane. So this is the situation that we're living now here in Lebanon, and we don't see. I don't see an end game because Hezbollah, it's very obvious they are very weak and they put everything on the government, but they are taking a lot of losses. I don't know how much they can sustain this because now previously you had parts of the government against you, and you had the West and the State is against you, but now the government is fully against you, and they
Yeah.
are working, and the army also they are saying that the army should take all the weapons. And today, Al Akhbar newspaper said that around 10,000 rockets were taken from Hezbollah by the army. I'm not sure about this number, but that's a report from Al Akhbar and usual Akhbar. They are somehow close to Hezbollah. So this is the situation in Lebanon. I don't know if you have anything to add, William.
No, I mean, again, it's just a tough situation. I mean, Hezbollah was just weakened as a result of the war, and again, it's been about a year. And I was here during the war too, and remember how everything was. And it's just been really hard on people. I got in a service or a minibus the other day, and I ran into the driver. Was a guy that I've talked to in the past. I hadn't seen him in about a year since the war,
Mm,
and he was telling me about how he had a small home in the south, and that was destroyed. And then he had a home in Dahia, in the suburbs that were bombed so badly. And his home was in a building where the Israeli military spokesperson, Avichai Adrae, like
mm.
announced, on social media that his building would be bombed. And so when he got the news, he rushed and with his wife gathered all their belongings as much as they could. And they left their house and it was bombed. And the whole building was destroyed just 10 minutes later after he left. So now he's, still driving the minibus and but has to rent a house, which is expensive. And I mean, he was probably one of the lucky ones because no one in his family was killed. He just lost his homes. But
Yeah, yeah,
anyways, the situation for people here is hard. And so yeah, I again, sorry to be so negative. Maybe other
no, no, it's
guests on
okay.
the podcast sometimes are a little more
No, no,
upbeat about
no
the
problem.
status of the resistance,
I,
but I'm
I,
always these days
I
feeling
just remembered
pessimistic.
when I was at home last year and they bombed the building behind us. Yeah, and we had a neighbor that was killed in the streets. He was just passing by. So I remember this, and I just want to say thanks to everybody for her donations. And I think we can move on to Syria. And first, I want to tell our viewers that William has published a book about Syria. It took him a lot of time to finish,
Yeah, yeah,
and you were writing it, and the Syrian government left, and يعني Bashar al-Assad left, and then came al-Julani, no,
yeah. So I
or Saddam.
basically finished writing the book, which focuses on the early period, like how the war started in 2011, and then just as it was basically finished, then Jolani and Hayat Tahrir al-Sham or HTS took over in December. So I just had to add a few things and revise it a little bit. But the book talks about, most people feel like the Arab Spring in 2011 was that, where all these protests erupted in different Arab countries, first in Tunisia and then in Egypt and Libya, um, Yemen, and then finally in Syria. They felt like it was these grassroots uprisings for democracy. But basically, I detail in the book how there was a plan that, to overthrow the Syrian government and destroy it, that was initiated by the Jewish neoconservatives in the Bush administration following 9/11. It was part of the plan to, destroy or overthrow the governments of 7 countries within 5 years that was talked about often right after 9/11. And that is, when the plans began to topple the government of Bashar al-Assad. And in 2011, the protests that erupted, not just in Syria, but in all the Arab Spring countries, they were all planned, by U.S. intelligence. with help from the Israelis and for the sake of Israel. And anyway, so that's what my book talks about. And that, of course, in addition to those protests, the U.S. policy was to not only spark these protests against Bashar's government, but also to then flood Syria with al-Qaeda militants, whether from Iraq or from Lebanon and from Saudi. And these al-Qaeda militants, which later took the form of ISIS and Jabhat al-Nusra, they all flooded into Syria and launched this insurgency with weapons from the CIA, weapons from Turkey, weapons from Qatar, weapons from Saudi. And, that
Yeah,
operation, that CIA-led operation, was finally successful in, this last year in December. And we see how Jolani, the former al-Qaeda and ISIS and Jabhat al-Nusra commander, once he took power in Damascus, was immediately embraced by the U.S., by Israel, all these different countries.
so
And
the
so
book,
the whole book talks about how the planning for that started and what happened in really extensive detail in the early couple of
yeah, so
years of the war. So it goes from the events of the book end in about 2015, but then there's a quick, final chapter discussing what happened
yes,
in
so the
December.
book name is Creative Chaos, and where can they buy it online?
Yeah, on Amazon.
Ah,
That's the
it's on
only place.
Amazon.
Yeah, just if you type in Creative Chaos and William Van Wagenen, then the book should be easy to find. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you are interested to know the beginnings of the Syrian war, you should read William's book.
and
He's
ho-
very knowledgeable
and how
in.
that partnership between the Western intelligence agencies and Al Qaeda or Jabhat al-Nusra and ISIS really began, and how it unfolded. Yeah.
Yeah. So يعني we saw Al-Sharia with with Putin in Moscow, which is very odd. يعني if you go 1 year prior to that and somebody showed you this picture, nobody will believe that. Yes, يعني we're living in a very weird times. So yeah, I wanted to ask you about that because you have enough knowledge to answer me about how do you think these pictures or the visit will affect his supporters in Syria, because many of them fought Russia, and also the Russian Air Force killed many of his people in Idlib for years, and now he went there. Uh, what do you think that the street is talking? And I want to ask you another question also, because I always wonder about that, the difference between the Syrians in Idlib and the Syrians in Damascus. Do you think, or do you know if Al-Sharia have the same support in Idlib as the same support he takes from the people in Damascus or other places also? Aleppo and Damascus and Homs and Idlib, because these are the four major locations in Syria that they have many the demographics usually in Syria spreads there.
Yeah, maybe to take the second question first, it's always a little bit hard to know how much support he has, but there are, again, Syria is way different. And the minorities in Syria, of course, are opposed to Jolani, the Druze, the Christians, the Muslims, or the Druze, the Christians, the Alawites, and the Kurds. But among the Sunnis, it's a little bit hard to know, and the Sunnis in Damascus are very, very different from the Sunnis in Idlib. And so on the Damascus side, a lot of the Sunnis there that I've spoken to there are not happy with Jolani because he's an extremist and he had this past in Al-Qaeda and he's sectarian and has been preaching hatred against the minorities for decades now. So they don't like him. And there's a certain culture in Damascus that's very open and, more liberal. And it's very different than the culture in Idlib, which has been under Jolani's control since 2015. And in Idlib, since that time, the population has become very radicalized or extreme or Salafi. So when you're in parts of Idlib, it's like being in Afghanistan. Every woman has a niqab on, and it's a very, very, it's basically like in a Taliban style society. And then you go to Damascus and it's like totally different. So the Sunnis of Syria, are not like one monolithic block. And so I don't know exactly how many support Gilani and how many don't, but I know a lot don't. But then at the same time, there are those in Idlib, for example, who are upset at Gilani because when he gets up on TV, like you said, he's meeting with the Russians, or he gets up and he's meeting with, say, the Americans, or he's saying things like, we need to protect the minorities, even though he's actually letting his supporters on the ground kill them with impunity. But he's saying things like we should protect the Christians or protect the minorities. And some people are so extreme that they are angry at him about that. And there is actually also, they say things like, well, why did we fight a jihad for 14 years only for him to get up and give talk about protecting minorities, or maybe having a secular state of some kind? They're like, hey, we fought for an Islamic state. So they're like upset. But again, there are some Sunnis who feel like, also the other thing is he's dealing with Israel all the time, right? It's clear that he's selling the Golan Heights, and he's not opposing all these Israeli incursions and the Israeli occupation of southern Syria. And there are a lot of Sunnis, including among these armed factions that are in the military, that basically say, look, we know he's just letting us like murder Alawites freely on the coast and in homes, basically, so we will shut up and not give him a hard time about dealing with Israel. So in some of the more extreme factions like that, some of their guys are getting assassinated, like the U.S., the international coalition that's still active.
Yeah, nobody is talking about it. And I'm seeing in the news at least a week there's one ex-ISIS member that is assassinated in Idlib, and nobody is talking about it. And usually they are not Syrians.
Yeah, so Jelani's guys will tell the Americans where this person is, and the Americans come and they assassinate him from the air. And in Idlib and in Aleppo, those strikes are happening pretty frequently. So anyone who opposes Jelani from the extreme right, they're getting eliminated. And then also again, the Alawites and the Jews are being murdered, as we've seen. So I don't know if that answers your question very well, but
No, it's
but
it's very
regarding the Russian thing, I've really had to, since December, really had to revise my understanding, because in the past, it's obviously Russia was a supporter of the Syrian government, and in 2015, when it looked like ISIS and Jabhat al-Nusra were going to take over Damascus, they got extremely close. The Russian Air Force intervened and started bombing and pushed those groups back and helped the Syrian army retake some territory, like for example, in Deir ez-Zor up to the Euphrates River. Whereas then the U.S. pivoted from their policy of supporting ISIS, and they then created, from the Kurdish groups in the northeast, they created the Syrian Democratic Forces, or the Qassid, and the Americans occupied